This is the marquee over the anteroom to Newfoundland's future. The place is called Bull Arm, and it's here that they may build a huge concrete platform for the extraction of Hibernia crude, the most labor-intensive project since the pyramids. Hibernia, with its oil, money, and jobs, was to be a power march into a future of sufficiency and prosperity, which has been Newfoundland's unfailingly frustrated dream since John Cabot cleaved the fog off Bonavista some 500 years ago. But Hibernia is on precarious hold. It's difficult to adjust to the idea that the province's future, Hibernia, may already be a thing of the past. But Newfoundland is staring down another economic gun barrel, the impending collapse of the entire offshore-inshore fishery. The great Newfoundland fishery, the heart, muscle, and soul of Newfoundland's very existence, why we are and how we came to be, may very possibly be at its end.
The unified map of Canada was completed.
Newfoundlanders were the last to respond to the expansive beckoning of the Canadian experiment. It was need and economics that tipped the scale in 1949. And this island, long battered by history, politics, and want, chose haven within the security of the Dominion. In those early days, when St. John's was still a rustic out-harbour, the mainland flow of commerce and social security fell as manna on the traditional craft and fishing economy. But from the very beginning, Joey Smallwood understood that Newfoundland had to be more than a picturesque shelter for an outmoded lifestyle.
A dream becoming a reality through the faith of the man who had the dream, Premier Joseph R. Smallwood.
Some entirely new industries have been established, and some old industries have been considerably enlarged and improved.
The old ways simply did not work. The fishery was a curse and a blessing, always there and never enough. Newfoundland had to explode out of its past, and exuberant development was Smallwood's Bethlehem star.
Nothing can hold us back now.
It was catch up or disappear, develop or perish, and so began the crazy jig that partnered sheep raising with machine factories, textiles, and hen farms. And if feathers, why not fur? Under a Canadian sky, anything was possible.
And so, for Newfoundland under Confederation, another promising new industry, top-grade mink.
And then there was the almost surreal spectacle of Premier Smallwood as Hopalong, Cassidy, and Hornrims, which, while it showed a commendable openness to novelty, suggested to critics a few cows shy of a herd. At mid-century, there were few spectacles in North American nature to equal the monumental cascades of the Upper Churchill River. Their grandeur and scale intoxicated Smallwood. Harnessing Churchill Falls, the mightiest engineering project of the century, would create thousands upon thousands of jobs and secure revenues for Newfoundland for eternity. It was a burst of exuberant economic nationalism.
This is our waterfall, and it will be developed, and when developed, will operate primarily, chiefly, mainly for the benefit of the people of Newfoundland.
Well, it did get built, but in a deal that makes the purchase of Manhattan Island from the Indians look like a piece of shrewd bargaining on the part of the Aboriginals, the revenues, billions, from Churchill Falls were handed over to Quebec. We gave it away. Come by chance. The name itself is emblematic of the 60s and 70s high industrial leaps into the future. Backed by public funds, the dream of establishing a world-class oil refinery proved to be an industrial failure of almost Soviet incompetence. The development virus that entered Newfoundland sold. What fantasies it induced, like having the Queen Elizabeth II on rent for opening day, and a party for such carbon-dated celebrities as Winston Churchill's grandson. And after the party was over, Come by Chance was the biggest bankruptcy in Canadian history. In this context and mood, the discovery of Hibernia came like an overdue benediction. It confirmed a deep sense in Newfoundlanders that the long, hard times had ever been but a prelude. Their ship had come in. The new Premier, Peckford, coincided with the arrival of the long-deferred dream. Oil was sexier than fish, and money was cuter than either. We were home.
We can have the best of both worlds, ladies and gentlemen. We can have our rural lifestyle and our fishery and our forestry, and we can make some money and get some jobs, some offshore oil and gas, if we really want it.
Following Hibernia's discovery, most of the 80s were consumed by relentless jurisdictional squabbles with Ottawa. Hibernia got politics, not petroleum. Votes, not jobs. The compulsion to develop took its most eerie lurch in the sprung Cucumber Project. This Spielbergian fantasy was Peckford's farewell walk on the wild side. Building an industrial greenhouse on the fog-ridden east coast made as much sense as fish farming in the Sahara. Peckford's tough nationalism had mutated into the first ever green Newfie joke. Overall, the relationship with Canada has been beneficial. Confederation has been both a shield and a harbour. But Newfoundlanders are vexed by the perception of the province as an economic dependent, Canada's ward. Not that there's been an absence of prideful local initiatives. They're just not enough. The caricature of Newfoundland as a permanent welfare case works an injury. Outboard charm is not a negotiable currency. The quieter, saner ways are inviting. It's just that economics means they can't be continued.
Most Newfoundland in rural communities is the fishery, and the fishery is gone. And like for me, I wanted to grow up in the fishery, and I can't because the fishery's not there. And like I had to go off and educate myself to do something I don't really want to do, because the fishery is gone. It has no future.
Well, even with a university degree, your chances of getting a job here are very slim.
If you do your education here, and you might decide to move away, you might not have any other choice.
No jobs. If you can't get it with an education, what's someone going to get it with a high school education? They're not getting a job. Right? You're going to move away, and what's everybody left with?
Make Christmas wreaths.
These perplexing questions, what Newfoundland has to present to its young people and what it must engage to support itself, are the business of Harold Lundrigan, chairman of Clydewell's Economic Advisory Council, a kind of super task force on Newfoundland's increasingly circumscribed economy. In a sad twist, the company he headed, the Lundrigan family business, after 3 generations, is even now sliding into receivership. There's an awful lot of Newfoundlanders, simply by economic circumstance, that really can't engage in enterprise in the sense that I'm using the word now. What does that do over a long period?
Well, it makes the people very despondent. And I think that's a worry now that many have who think about this, and I think many people in government have, is if you get to a stage where there's a hopelessness as to what we're going to do, you can't get ideas being generated or enthusiasm to do something. And I contend that probably of late, within the last 2 or 3 years, there's a growing sense of that hopelessness.
Do you think that because of our economic circumstances and because of the small nature of Newfoundland villages and outports, that a certain number of people have been schooled, have been taught that basically a dependent kind of existence is really the only one around?
Oh yes, and that's the reason why you see such ingenuity going into ways and means of getting UI and all that sort of thing. It's the only game in town. If they cannot get access to these funds, many of them would be literally hungry. So they've generated an ability, or developed an ability, to access these funds. But most of the people are fed up with it. Some are saying, well, if the UI system is in existence today, it may not be 5 years from now. So we better find a way to do things ourselves. And we better find a way to generate some wealth and export it. We just got to do that, because otherwise it's down the tube.
There has always been a sweet counterbalance to Newfoundland's failure to achieve. The pristine and the natural are in their native home here. The outport culture betokens an enrichment and vitality of unstateable value. But you cannot harness charm and nostalgia. Museum culture is for visiting, not growing up in. We are in a period of hard choices, and the choices are narrowing. What should replace what can no longer be sustained? The Placentia Bay town of Long Harbour, the site of a defunct phosphorus plant, an environmental mini Chernobyl, is now considering building an incinerator to burn garbage shipped in from New York, a parable for Newfoundland. The North American lifestyle demands an equivalent economy, but the urge for contemporary means and the old ways cannot coexist. The shopping mall and the outport cannot occupy the same landscape. And there has been a massive shock to the province's morale and sense of self-esteem, deriving from the infamous church-related sex scandals of the last few years. Mount Cashel and its attendant furies stripped Newfoundland of some of its protective innocence. The glories of Newfoundland are of tradition and character. The question is, can these virtues now be accommodated? This small island was settled just 30 years ago, now just a derelict relic of a faded time and a fading way of life. The out islands of these bays and coves were depopulated and relocated. The logic of social economic policy drove the people away, some just across the harbor and some to the mainland and beyond. But Crawley's Island here is more than just a piece of dilapidated history. It may be something of a prophecy too, for with Hibernia crumbling and the entire fishery itself under threat, the same chill wind is blowing across Newfoundland as a whole. For the Journal, I'm Rex Murphy.